the end. So now I'm going to stop Exhibit 31 here briefly because the image has changed, correct?
Correct.
And now this video is of the inside of Cup Foods again, correct?
Correct.
And so we'll see here that you come in and this is when you had the conversation with your manager about the first trip.
Correct.
All right, so let's let 31 run again, please. Now, if we can stop here for a moment, and the timestamp reflects 7:57:56. You kind of walked off screen, correct?
Correct.
And what was going on at this point in time?
I think that was the conversation I had with my manager when I was saying that he did not want to come inside, but I'd offer to pay, but he said no, just tell him to come back inside.
So did you tell your manager you would just take care of the 20?
I believe so. I did.
And but he directed you then to go back to the vehicle again.
Correct.
Now, we saw you go out on the first trip with another individual, another employee.
Correct.
And he did not come back into the store, did he?
No, he left.
And so when you were told by the manager to go out a second time, did you take some other coworkers with you?
Correct.
Whose idea was that?
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, so let's run Exhibit 31 again, please. So let's pause the video right here if we could, please. And for the record, now we're back outside again, correct?
Correct.
And the record should reflect that we paused at 20:21:43. So we see that two other individuals coming out before you, correct? And there's appears to be a woman in a black jacket, correct?
Correct.
And is she a coworker, or was she at the time?
Correct.
Had she worked there longer than you?
Correct.
And the other individual has a white T-shirt on. Had he worked there longer than you?
Correct.
And is he actually related to the owners of the store?
Correct.
And so they were out ahead of you at this point, correct?
Correct.
In fact, you had to sort of jog to keep up with them, didn't you?
Correct.
And all right, so let's run 31 then. Now let's pause here just for a moment, please. The record should reflect we're at 20:22:15 as the timestamp where we paused it. The individual in the white T-shirt initially went up to the driver's side, correct?
Correct.
And we see you standing here behind the SUV, correct?
Correct.
And eventually the individual in the white T-shirt went around to the passenger side door, which was open.
Correct.
And were you able to hear the conversation that the the guy in the white t-shirt was having with the occupants of the vehicle?
At this point in time, I was not able to hear.
So then let's run the video some more, please. All right, now we see, if we can pause here, please. This is 2022-21. You walked up to the passenger side of the SUV, correct?
Correct.
So at this point, were you able to hear the conversations that the individual in the white t-shirt was having with the occupants?
Correct.
And were you also able to hear what the occupants of the vehicle were saying and doing?
Correct.
And can you describe for the jurors then what occurred during this period at the SUV?
So in the second time we went out, the person in the passenger seat was doing most of the talking. We were telling him, just come inside, we just want to talk to George. And the person in the passenger seat was saying how that's not me. Like, I tried to use a fake bill and you put me on game, so I ripped it. And that'll happen in the video because he also tried to use a fake bill that I did not let him use. And then he ripped it and he put it on the ground there. So he was just explaining like what had happened.
And so just to be clear, you said the passenger seat, you're talking about the front passenger seat.
Correct.
And at that time, did you have any interaction with Mr. Floyd directly?
I do not recall.
All right. So let's run Exhibit 31 a little bit. Now I'm going to pause it here real quickly, please. And for the record, it's 2022-34. We saw the individual in the white t-shirt sort of bend over and pick something up. Can you tell the jury what was happening there?
He was picking up the fake bill that the individual in the passenger seat tried to use.
Okay. And you referenced earlier one that was torn in half.
Correct.
Is that the bill that was torn in half?
Correct.
All right. And let's keep running 31 then, please. I'm going to ask to pause it right here, please. The timestamp reflects 2023-35. It appears the two of you are now walking away from the SUV, correct?
Correct.
So during those preceding moments, it appears that the two of you are talking with at least some occupants of the vehicle.
Correct.
And did you have any conversations with Mr. Floyd, or was it just the front seat passengers?
Just the front seat passenger.
Were you able to see Mr. Floyd at all during that interaction?
Correct.
What did you see about him?
As I said earlier, he was just kind of shaking his head and putting his hands in the air, like kind of like, why is this happening to me? Like, I don't want this to happen, sort of thing.
And so he appeared to be awake.
Correct.
And so what was the end result of that conversation?
George Floyd did not choose to come into the store.
Neither did the passenger front.
Correct.
Right. And so then let's watch Exhibit 31 run here, please. All right, so at the end of that video shows you and the other individual entering back into the store, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When you got back into the store, what did you do about the two trips out to the vehicle?
We told our manager that he still refused to come into the store.
Do you know what the manager decided to do about that?
He instructed one of my coworkers to call the police.
And so did you know if that happened,
Correct.
that somebody did call the police?
Correct.
Was it you who called the police about it?
No.
Was it another coworker?
Correct.
And did you ask the coworker to make the call?
No.
And were you present when he made the call?
Correct.
So you were there next to him or something?
Correct.
And so at some point, did the police respond to the store?
Correct.
And when they responded, did you see the officers actually come into the store?
I do not recall.
Did they deal with you when they came to the store?
No.
Do you know who they dealt with?
They went and talked to my manager.
And you were not involved in the conversations with the officers at all at that time?
No.
So what did you do?
I was still working cashier.
Just went about your business.
Correct.
And as you did that, as you continued working, did you notice a commotion out in front of the store?
Correct.
Do you recall what it was that sort of first drew your attention out there?
I just saw a few people at first, and then the crowd grew larger, and pretty soon the store was empty as well. So there was no one that I needed to help inside the store. So then I proceeded to go outside, see what was happening.
When you saw this crowd gathering, where was the crowd?
It was right where the bus stop is on Chicago,
So kind of right in front
or a
of the
little to the left,
right in front of the store.
10 paces.
I'm sorry, I spoke over you.
Sorry, I was just saying it was just 10 paces to the left of the bus stop.
And so the bus stop, as you're looking out from the store?
Correct.
And so did you, in fact, decide to go out and look into what the crowd was gathering for?
Correct.
And when you went out there, what did you see?
I saw people yelling and screaming. I saw Derek with his knee on George's neck on the ground.
So let me back up just a little bit. Now, you say Derek, do you mean Mr. Chauvin?
Correct.
Now, did you know who that person was at the time?
No.
So you've just learned his name since then.
Correct.
So was that person wearing a police uniform?
Correct.
And where did you see that individual?
On top of George Floyd.
And you didn't, well, other than seeing Mr. Floyd that day, you did not know him before then, correct?
Correct.
Did you recognize him as the person who had been in the store earlier
Correct.
and the person that you had tried to talk to in the SUV?
Correct.
And did you see any other officers in the area?
I saw, I think his name is Officer Tao.
Where did you see him?
He was in front of the crowd, kind of telling people to stand back.
And do you remember about how many people were in the crowd?
Probably about several.
And when they were, well, what did you see the officer on Mr. Floyd? What was the relation of their two bodies? What was happening there?
George was motionless, limp, and Chauvin seemed he was in a resting state, meaning like he just rested his knee on his neck.
And what did you do when you saw that?
I pulled my phone out first and I called my mom and told her not to come downstairs. And then I started recording.
And did you make a recording?
Correct.
Did you keep that recording?
No.
Why not?
Later on that night, I deleted it because when they picked George up off of the ground, the ambulance went straight on 38th instead of going straight on Chicago. And if you live in South Minneapolis, the easiest way to get to the hospital would have been straight on Chicago. So that to me kind of made it like clear that he was no longer with us.
So you thought he had died.
Correct.
Not quite sure why that would, make you delete the video.
Oh, I just didn't want to have to show it to anyone or be questioned about it.
And so after you called your mom, you started taking a video. What did you do after that?
I was recording until one of my coworkers was pushed by an officer.
And so what had you seen the coworker do right before the push?
He was yelling at the officer, kind of how the other people in the crowd were doing, and asking them to check his pulse, if he's breathing, see if he's okay, kind of thing.
So did he leave the sidewalk curb area and go onto the road?
Correct.
Okay. How far?
I do not recall.
This coworker of yours that got pushed, do you know how old he was that day?
I do not recall.
Is he older or younger than you?
Younger.
So teenager.
Correct.
And after he got pushed, did you see what happened to him or what became of him?
Yes. My other coworker just like grabbed him up and brought him inside.
So removed him from the scene.
Correct.
And prior to coming into court, did we show you a security video from Cup Foods that shows that area
Correct.
and that area while you were out there?
Correct.
And did that appear to depict truly and accurately the time period during which you were out there during this incident?
Correct.
And Your Honor, I'd offer then what we've marked as Exhibit 33.
33 is received.
All right, so now I'm going to start showing Exhibit 33, and we may pause this like we had done the other videos, all right? I'm going to pause it right here for a moment. You recognize this scene,
Correct.
and this is you in the foreground, right?
Correct.
And what were you doing right at that moment?
That was when I was calling my mom to tell her not to come down the stairs.
And if she were to come down the stairs, this is where you were living, correct?
Correct.
Is the door she would have come out, would that have been in this scene?
Correct.
Can you take that stylus and just show where that door would be?
It would swing open right here.
So if she had come down, she'd have come right into this scene, correct?
Correct.
And then you talked about a coworker who was younger than you, who came out. Is that the individual in the white t-shirt?
Correct.
All right. And, okay, so then we will continue to run Exhibit 33, please. I'm going to pause it right here, please. For the record, this is 8/28/34. And can you describe for the jurors what you're doing at this moment?
I was recording the scene.
So this, you had walked farther over towards the scene,
Correct.
really by the door where your mom would have come out if she had come out.
Correct.
And the individual in the white t-shirt, he had stepped off the curb into the street here, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so then let's continue to run Exhibit 33, please. And we're going to pause right there, please, at 8/28/41. Is that the moment you were talking about when your coworker got pushed?
Correct.
And did you see it all anywhere in there where he touched the police officer?
No.
And so then you are now standing around behind that group of people, correct?
Correct.
Did you know anybody in that crowd?
My two coworkers.
All right. So right now, if you could just put like a line or a dot on where your two coworkers are. And both of those are individuals who went out during the second trip to the SUV, correct?
Correct.
And did you know any of the other people there in the crowd at the time?
Not at the time.
Did you know Miss Funari?
I think. Yes.
You know Alyssa Funari?
Yes.
And was she there at the time?
Correct.
Do you see where she is now?
Correct.
And how did you know her?
Just through school.
And all right, so then let's continue to run Exhibit 33, please. I'm going to stop right here, please. Can you describe for the jurors and what we're seeing, what's going on there in that segment of the video?
That was when one of the coworkers kind of grabbed up the other coworker and brought him back inside, and I was just yelling like, "Chill out, chill out, chill out."
And so when his coworkers came to get the young man in the white T-shirt, he went with them back into the store.
Correct.
And you were following them?
Correct.
All right, so let's continue to run 33 then. I want to pause here for a moment, please. For the record, 82904, can you tell the jurors what happened, what you were doing here, I guess?
At this point, I think I was just kind of emotional, and I went to the African American that was standing there in the curb, and I was just like they're not gonna help him. This is what we have to deal with. So.
Okay.
Sustained.
Yeah,
He'll be stricken.
that's fine. So you had a conversation with another person standing there.
Correct.
And when you walked up there, we saw just before I stopped it, there was a young girl there in a green shirt. Did you see her when you were walking up there?
Correct.
You remember seeing her in the store earlier?
Correct.
Did you know who she was?
No.
And you remember being the cashier when she was in the store earlier?
Correct.
And then can we continue to run Exhibit 33, please? I'm going to pause here for a moment. The record should reflect 829:55. We saw you standing there with your hands on your head for a while, correct?
Correct.
What was going through your mind during that time period?
Disbelief and guilt.
Why guilt?
If I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided.
We also saw another individual get pushed by an officer, correct?
Correct.
And what did you do after that happened?
I was just trying to calm him down, tell him to stand back.
And all right, so let's continue running 33 then, please. Who are you talking to there, Mr. Arden?
My mom.
Okay, so that takes us to the end of Exhibit 33. You were going back into the store.
Correct.
And So then did you just continue to work your shift
Correct.
in, so did you continue to work at Cup Foods as long as you could?
No.
Why not?
I didn't feel safe.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Nelson.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here today. You testified that you currently are 20 years old,
19.
19. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. And at the time, you were both living and working at Cup Foods, right? Or in the apartments above, you were living and working there.
Correct.
All right. And you testified that you had worked there for about a month and a half to 2 months before this incident?
4 months.
4 months. Okay. You would agree that you've made a few statements in connection with this case?
Correct.
You were first interviewed by agents of the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and FBI back on September 10th of last year. Do you recall that?
Correct.
And then you have had another meeting as of March 12th with the prosecutors and other agents of the BCA, right?
Correct.
And you understand that those statements were recorded,
Correct.
and you understand that we've been provided with transcripts.
Correct.
Have you had an opportunity to review your statements prior to coming into court?
Yes.
And you had an opportunity to review your transcript?
Correct.
All right. So I just kind of want to walk through again. We've now watched a few videos from both inside the store, outside the store, and from a neighboring business. Agreed?
Correct.
And you've had an opportunity to address some things that happened inside the store, outside the store, throughout the whole incident, right?
Correct.
All right. So you were working, your shift you said started at about 3 p.m. that day?
Correct.
And this incident ultimately was around the 7:30 to 8 o'clock hour, right?
Correct.
And you, video, when we were watching the first video, you and your coworkers seemed to get along quite well.
Correct.
Talking, laughing, having fun, interacting with customers, things of that nature.
Correct.
And the store is sort of like a one-stop kind of a store, right? You can do a lot of things in the store.
Correct.
They've got a deli, you said. You've got cell phone service, cell phone repair, snacks, and then there's the separate tobacco area, right?
Correct.
Now, in the store, is there, where we see you behind the counter, is there an entrance for employees into the tobacco area that you go through?
Could you ask the question again, please?
Sure. So I understand when a customer comes into Cup Foods, there are essentially 2 doors that they can go through, right?
Correct.
One of them on the right-hand side is the tobacco shop, right?
Correct.
And the one on the left-hand side is the convenience store, the general store, right?
Correct.
All right. And the tobacco shop is separate because you have to be a certain age to go into the store, right?
Correct.
You have to be 21, right?
No.
18?
To buy products or to simply go into the store?
To go in. No, to go into the tobacco portion.
I'm not sure there's an age requirement. People came in no matter how old they were.
All right. Is within the store, is there a partition or some sort of glass that inside the store separates the tobacco area from the convenience store?
Correct.
And so my question is where you stand, like, do you have to walk out through the convenience store door and go into the tobacco store door, or is there a separate entrance where you can get into the tobacco portion?
From where are you starting?
If you were the cashier there, right?
Oh, you can just walk over to the tobacco section. You don't have to go all the way around,
Right.
if that's
Okay.
what you meant.
That's what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I may have not been articulating that as well.
Yeah, no worries. That's
All right.
my fault.
And the you were in the store and you observed a person who you later learned was George Floyd come into the store,
Correct.
and you ultimately assisted him in the store.
Correct.
And he was in the store, and the person that you observed in the front passenger seat was also in the videos we just watched, right?
Correct.
He had on a pair of red sweatpants and a white t-shirt, I believe.
Correct.
All right. And did you have any interactions with him while you were in the store?
Correct.
I believe you said that he had also attempted to use a counterfeit bill,
Correct.
but you stopped him.
Correct.
Did that happen before or after your interaction with Mr. Floyd?
Before.
All right. And so when he handed you that bill, you knew that that bill was a fraud.
Correct.
And you immediately kind of said, hey, I'm not taking this bill.
Correct.
You knew the store policy at that time, right?
Correct.
And the store policy being if you took a counterfeit bill, that became your responsibility.
Correct.
And so it would get deducted from your paycheck, in other words.
Correct.
And you have some sort of like store tab where you could buy merchandise yourself at the store or services, and it would get deducted from your salary.
Correct.
All right. And so that interaction with that other individual, approximately, was it earlier in the day? Was it, a few minutes before you interacted with Mr. Floyd? How long before did that happen?
Earlier in the day.
So both Mr. Floyd and that individual had been in the store earlier in the day as well, right?
Correct.
And was that an hour, 2 hours? Do you recall?
I do not recall.
All right. And but you remembered him when he came back in the store later in the afternoon.
Correct.
You remembered he was the guy that had tried to hand you a counterfeit bill from earlier.
Correct.
He hadn't changed his clothes, didn't look any different.
I don't think so.
Okay. And so when Mr. Floyd and this other individual came back in the store, we observed kind of him walking around the store, right?
Correct.
And you were helping other customers, you were talking to your coworkers. It's fair to say you weren't paying a lot of attention to what Mr. Floyd was doing at all times he was in the store. Right?
Correct.
But now that you've had an opportunity to see the video, you get to see some of his other interactions and things of that nature, right?
Correct.
Now, there were other customers in the store. The store is a pretty busy store, right?
Correct.
And your manager that you talked to, did you notice that he had what appeared to be a pistol in his?
Correct.
Do you know him to carry a firearm at the store?
Correct.
And when you watched the video, did you see Mr. Floyd sort of do some little dance at one point?
No.
Okay, we'll come back. But you didn't observe that when he was in the store.
No.
All right. And if it's on the video, it would be on the video, right?
Correct.
Again, so at some point, Mr. Floyd appeared to purchase some food as well, right?
Correct.
That being a banana, it looked like in the video.
Correct.
Did you sell him the banana?
I do not recall.
Okay. And when he handed you that $20 bill, you testified that you immediately knew it was a fake.
Correct.
Did it appear to be the same type of fake or maybe even the same counterfeit bill that you had refused earlier in the day?
Correct. It did appear to be similar.
All right. And you took that bill and you held it up and you kind of looked at it through the light, right?
Correct.
What were you looking for?
That's a good question. I have no idea.
Right.
I was just looking at it.
All
I
right.
don't know.
But you immediately recognized it to be a counterfeit bill.
Correct.
And, you know, some bills have like a metal or some sort of a stripe through it. Have you been looking for something like that?
I'll be honest, I don't know what I was looking for. I just knew it was fake.
All right. You could tell based on the texture of the bill.
And the color of it, as I stated earlier.
Yep.
It had a blue pigment.
So, and you had a pleasant interaction with Mr. Floyd.
Correct.
You were asking him about sports and things of that nature, right?
Correct.
And you formed the opinion that Mr. Floyd was under the influence of something.
Correct.
And you base that on sort of, I think you said, a delay in his speech and response, right?
Correct.
So you had, unlike a conversation that we may be having right now, that's rapid, and if you asked him a question, there would be much more of a slowed or delayed response.
Correct.
And I believe in your interviews, you also indicated that he was having some trouble with certain words.
Correct. I think he was trying to form the words.
Right. So he was delayed in his speech, and you believed him to be under the influence of something.
Correct.
All right. And you were present when your coworker called 911.
Correct.
And do you recall him telling 911 that he appeared to be under the influence?
Correct.
And you had also had, by the time 911 was called, you had had two other interactions with Mr. Floyd outside of the car.
Correct.
All right. And so you made the decision after Mr. Floyd handed you this counterfeit $20 bill that you weren't going to call him out on it like you did with the earlier bill.
Correct.
And was that in part because you felt maybe he's under the influence?
Partially. The other person that had come in, it kind of seemed like he was trying to scheme, like he knew it was a fake bill. He was trying to get over. I thought that George didn't really know that it was a fake bill, so I thought I'd be doing him a favor.
Okay, trying to help him out. And could you have? I'm just asking generally. Could you have just let it kind of go and then told your manager later, "Hey, put it on my tab"?
Correct.
And but you made the decision to talk to your manager, show him the bill, and your manager instructed you to go talk to Mr. Floyd and his friend out in the car.
Correct.
So when you went out to the car the first time with your first coworker, you had a relatively short conversation with him, right?
Correct.
And you went to the passenger side of the vehicle, and the person in the red pants and the white t-shirt, that was the same person that had previously tried to pass the fake $20 bill.
Correct.
And you were encouraging them to come into the store.
Correct.
You were kind of saying, you got to come in, you paid with the fake bill, we got to deal with this, right?
Correct.
You specifically told them that he had used a counterfeit bill.
Correct.
And that they needed to come in and either pay for the cigarettes or
Talk to my manager.
talk to the manager, right?
Correct.
Okay. And how would you describe the general tenor of that conversation? What I mean by that is, was it pleasant or was it more aggressive?
It was pleasant. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form aggressive. It was just pretty annoying.
Yeah, just come on in, guys. It was your first attempt to kind of say, hey, come on in, guys. You got to deal with this, right?
Correct.
And you were trying to be polite to these gentlemen.
Correct.
And you then had that conversation. And during that first conversation, you said that Mr. Floyd was not really speaking to you, right?
No.
And you said that he was kind of putting his hands up and putting his head back and things of that nature, right?
Correct.
And you then went back into the store, talked to your manager again, and told him they were not agreeable to coming into the store.
Correct.
And the second time you left the store, you were sort of following the other coworkers, agreed?
Correct.
And you would agree that that video sort of showed the three of you almost run out of the store.
Correct.
And you wanted to get them before they drove away, right? Or why would you run the second time?
Correct.
I mean, so they didn't drive away, or for some
Sure.
other reason?
Correct.
Now, in terms of the second exchange at the vehicle, the coworker went to the driver's side at first, right?
Correct.
And you stayed back a little bit, right?
Correct.
And then you brought back up to the vehicle, right?
Yes.
And you heard what was the conversation, you heard what was being said, both by the passenger of the vehicle as well as your coworker.
Correct.
You indicated that the passenger pulled out the other $20 bill, right?
Picked it up off the ground
Why was it on the ground?
because he threw it on the ground.
The bill that Mr. Floyd used, was that still in the store?
Correct.
And so this other $20 bill was he threw it on the ground, right?
Correct.
Your coworker picks it up, and who ripped it?
The person that was in the passenger seat.
Right? He handed it, your coworker handed it back to him or something? Or did he rip it and then throw it on the ground?
The person in the passenger seat ripped the bill, threw it on the ground. The bell was talking to him, and the person picked it up, and it's in a bell.
Okay. And again, this conversation was primarily with the passenger of the vehicle.
Correct.
And there was a female in the back seat of the car.
Correct.
Was she engaged in the conversation at all either?
No.
All right. So, and Mr. Floyd, again, he was not really part of the conversation at that point either.
Not really.
He didn't say, you didn't remember him saying anything.
I would say I do not recall.
Okay. But again, you described his behavior, I think, as kind of just shaking his head, putting his hands up, putting his head back, things of that nature, right?
Correct.
The second conversation was the demeanor of, or the tenor of that conversation more heated,
Yes.
and there was an outright refusal by either Mr. Floyd or his passenger to come back into the store.
Correct.
And it was based on that conversation that you decided to, or it was decided by your manager to call 911.
Correct.
And again, you were present and heard the 911 call.
Correct.
Now, in your initial conversation with agents, when they were asking you about approaching the vehicle, do you recall describing it as a hot block?
Correct.
What does that mean?
A lot of situations happen.
And do you recall describing your conversation and the words that Mr. Floyd was having trouble saying?
Correct.
Do you remember now today what words Mr. Floyd was having trouble saying?
No.
Would it have been baseball? Do you remember saying that? Do you remember? You don't remember? Would it refresh your
I do
recollection?
not recall.
Would it refresh your recollection to view a transcript of your statement?
Absolutely.
I'm on the wrong page, I think. Here, give me just a second. apologize. I can't find it right now. We may come back to that. Do you recall describing some other behaviors of Mr. Floyd while he was in the store?
Correct.
What were those behaviors?
He was doing a couple of stretches, like a lunge,
Okay,
kind of.
like kind of stepping forward like
No,
this,
it was more of a side lunge. Start here.
like that.
Correct.
So for the record, I'm standing kind of feet together and stretching over to the side with one leg, right?
Correct.
Putting his arms in front of him. And kind of based on your observations of his behavior, his speech patterns, that's what caused you to form the impression he was under the influence.
Correct.
Now, then you ultimately met with the prosecution team on March 12th in preparation for your testimony.
Correct.
And that's when you were able to view some of the videos that we've watched here today.
Correct.
And again, you understood that there were agents or law enforcement officers that were there at that time.
Correct.
Do you recall telling them that you felt that Mr. Floyd couldn't comprehend the conversation?
Which conversation?
Your conversation with him.
The first conversation we had?
Right.
I do not recall, but if that's on my transcript, that's the way it is.
Okay. Now, you said after that phone call to the police, you didn't see the police kind of come in the store. You didn't deal with them initially, right?
Correct.
And you just kind of went back to work, right?
Correct.
Dealing with customers, goofing off with your coworkers, kind of just average day, right?
Correct.
But then at some point you noticed there was a commotion outside and you decided to go back outside and see what was going on, right?
Correct.
And you said the first thing you did was to call your mom to tell her not to come downstairs.
Correct.
And then you walked over and you started recording, right?
Correct.
And then after you did some recording, you saw your coworker appear to be pushed by the police officer, right?
Correct.
And you got your coworker, you brought him back inside.
I did not.
Your other coworkers kind of went back inside, right?
Correct.
And you stayed outside, or it appeared that you walked back to the door and then walked back to the crowd.
Correct.
And you described the crowd that they were yelling and screaming.
Correct.
And at one point you tried to actually stop someone or
Hold them back.
hold them back.
Correct.
And that individual appeared to be pretty angry,
Correct.
and you held him back because you didn't want him to get involved.
Yes. Well, I would say not necessarily angry. He had just been pushed, so he was kind of defending himself.
Okay. And you kind of just said to him, calm down, stand back, right?
Correct.
I have no further questions, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Any redirect?
Yes, sir. Prior to working or during your work at Cup Foods, did they ever send you to training on how to identify a fake bill?
No.
Or just kind of learning from experience?
Correct.
When you did interact with Mr. Floyd in the store, What was his demeanor like?
He seemed very friendly, approachable. He was talkative. He seemed to just be having average Memorial Day, just living his life. But he did seem high.
During the second trip out to the vehicle, it was your coworker who did the majority of the talking to Mr. Floyd and the passenger.
Correct.
So Mr. Nelson asked you to agree that that was a more heated conversation. Was it you who made it more heated or your coworker?
My coworker.
And Mr. Nelson asked you to agree that there was an outright refusal to come back into the store. Was that an actual wording that was used, or was that just Mr. Nelson's words, outright refusal?
Those were Mr. Nelson's words.
So Mr. Floyd did not say to you, I'm outright refusing to come back into the store.
No.
But to be fair, they were not coming back into the store, right?
Correct.
You were asked also about the stretches that Mr. Floyd was doing in the store. And Mr. Nelson demonstrated for us that was a pretty accurate demonstration of what you saw.
Correct.
During that, Mr. Floyd did not fall down,
No.
didn't lose his balance at all.
No.
When he indicated he wanted to go buy some cigarettes, you and he both had to move down to the cigarette counter, correct?
Correct.
And is that what he did? Did he tell you I want to buy some cigarettes?
Correct.
Did he tell you what brand he wanted?
I do not recall.
We saw you just grab a pack, right?
That could have been the case.
And you gave them to him.
Correct.
And he provided you money and took the change, right?
Correct.
So he was able to complete that whole transaction, correct?
Absolutely.
You didn't have to guess at what cigarettes he wanted.
Correct.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any recross?
Sorry, thank you. You were asked a couple of questions about the counterfeit bill.
Correct.
Do you get a lot of counterfeit bills in that store?
No.
Has it happened before?
Correct.
And I believe you were previously asked about good counterfeits and bad counterfeits in your statements with police.
I do not recall.
Okay. Have you seen some bills that are better counterfeits than other bills?
I don't think so.
Okay. But
Not personally, no.
Okay, but you understood that immediately this was a counterfeit bill.
Correct.
Nothing further.
Thanks, sir. You are excused.
Thank you.
The next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Christopher Belfry to the stand.
If you just stand right here, raise your right hand. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Have a seat. Sir, in order to be able to be heard more clearly, I'm going to keep my mask on, but if you wouldn't mind, if you would take your mask off, would you be comfortable doing that? All right, thank you. We're going to also test out how the microphone picks you up by having you state your full name and spell each of your names.
Christopher Belfry, CHRISTOPHERVELFREY.
All right, it sounds like it'll work fine even if you don't lean in, so
Yep.
feel free. All right,
No problem.
Mr. Frank.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Belfry.
Good morning.
And can you tell us, sir, how old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah.
I'm 45.
And just tell us, if you would, the general area where you live.
South Minneapolis.
And on May 25th of 2020, is that where you lived?
May 25th of 2020 is where I live? No.
No. Is that where you lived on that day?
Yeah, South Minneapolis.
And how long have you lived in South Minneapolis?
About 3 years.
And you are from, well, let me ask it this way. Are you familiar with the area of 38th in Chicago?
Yes.
And is there a store at one of the corners, at least one of the corners of 38th in Chicago?
Yes.
At least on May 25th there was.
Yes.
And is there also a restaurant there?
Yes.
What was the restaurant at that intersection?
What was it?
Yeah, what was the name of it?
I really don't know.
Okay.
To tell you the truth.
On May 25th of 2020, did you go to the area of 38th in Chicago to get some food from one of those restaurants?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Cup Foods.
Okay. So you went to Cup Foods to get food?
Right. But there's another restaurant across the street. I thought you was talking about that one.
I was, so my
Okay,
fault.
Right.
So you went to that intersection sometime in the late afternoon, early evening, correct?
Correct.
And where did you drive there?
Yes.
Where did you park?
On the corner of 38th and Chicago, on the 38th side, facing Bloomington, or what is that, Cedar?
All right.
area.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up something we've had admitted as Exhibit 1.
Mhm.
And that should come up on the screen in front of you.
Right.
Do you see that photograph?
Right.
Do you recognize what is depicted there?
That's 38th and Chicago intersection.
All right. And you should have right in front of you a stylus like this, maybe a different color. See that?
Mhm.
What I'd ask you to do is just for the jurors, draw on the screen where you drove up and where you parked on that day.
Came this way, parked right here.
And when you parked there, do you recall seeing a vehicle in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what kind of vehicle that was?
Mercedes Benz,
Do you remember what color it was?
not right offhand.
Okay. What style of car or
It's
vehicle?
like a hatchback Mercedes Benz, like a sports truck or something like that.
And when you pulled up there and parked, did you see something that drew your attention?
Not right offhand. Shortly after, yes, when two officers was coming across the street, I noticed them coming and they approached the vehicle in front of me. One officer drew a handgun and opened the door and pointed the gun at whoever was in the driver's seat.
So at that point in time, had you gotten your food already or not yet?
No,
Okay.
no, sir.
And so you were just sitting in your car and you see these officers pull up
Yes, sir.
or walk up, correct?
Right.
And after seeing that, what happened next?
Kind of startled me, from where I'm from, when you see officers.
Stop right there. Don't talk about past experience, talk about
Yes,
what your
sir.
reaction was.
Yeah.
Thank
Let
you.
me
It startled me,
Yeah, let me-
when I seen the officer raise his gun.
let me just,
I started recording.
okay, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you
Right.
about, right? So at some point you started recording that.
Right.
And
Correct.
that was because of basically what you saw, correct?
Right.
All right. And so when you were parked there, you started making a recording, correct?
Correct.
At some point you stopped the recording.
Correct.
Why did you stop that recording at that point in time?
Because I heard more sirens pulling up and I didn't want to be trapped in between the whole commotion of what's going on. I didn't know exactly what was going on. It's just I didn't want to be in the middle of, bunch of commotion about what's going on. So I moved across the street.
So you moved your car.
Yes, sir.
And prior to coming into court today, did we show you a copy of that video?
Yes, sir.
And did that video truly and accurately represent what you were seeing while you were recording it?
Yes, sir.
We've marked that as Exhibit 35, and Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 35 at this time.
35 is received.
Okay, Mr. Belfry, we're going to play that video for you now, and then we'll ask you some questions about it either during or after it, okay?
Okay.
Now, when you were making that recording, do you recall if your window was down and your,
Yeah. Yes, sir.
so we were able to hear some of it on the video. Were you able to hear any better sitting there in person than with the video?
I vaguely heard most of it.
What were you kind of hearing?
I heard him asking him to let me see your hand. He's saying, please, something about I've been shot or something before. Please don't, something like that. And at that time, that's when I heard the sirens pulling up and they pulling him out. And that's when I went to back up and turn around.
Okay.
Stop.
And so I'm going to go back now to Exhibit 1. We'll put that up again. And again, if you would take the stylus and just kind of show the jurors where you went when you moved your vehicle.
Backed up. Moved the vehicle there.
So for the record, you're showing that you moved from the Dragon Walk side of 38th to the Cup Food side of 38th,
Yes,
correct?
sir.
And when you got over there, what did you do?
I continued to record.
And were you, well, you started recording again, correct?
Right.
And when you were recording, did you have somebody in the car with you?
Yes, my fiance. Well, she was in the car, in Cup Foods getting the food. So by the time I turned around, she came out and got in the car.
And so during that recording, some conversations between you and her were also recorded.
Yes, sir.
And so did you start recording then at that point?
Yes, sir.
And prior to coming into court, did you also have a chance to review that video?
Yes, sir.
And it appears to be a true and accurate copy of the actual video you made.
Most definitely.
Now, I will tell you that we have deleted the audio from this video.
Yes, sir.
Conversation that you and your fiance had, not important, it's the video.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
And so we have marked that as Exhibit 36, and we would offer it at this time.
Any objection? 36 is received.
All right, so now we'll show Exhibit 36. Now I'd ask to pause it right here, please. And there's no timestamp on the video, so we will do our best to describe it. Oh, there is a timestamp on the video. This will be at approximately 26 seconds. Do you see that?
Mhm.
And what you're seeing here, obviously there are two officers. Well, there are now three officers on the scene, correct?
Correct.
And the original two officers are in this view, and one of the officers is with the individual sitting on the ground, correct?
Correct.
The individual sitting on the ground, do you recall seeing him from when you were parked behind the Mercedes before?
Correct.
Where was that individual when you were parked behind the vehicle?
He was in the driver's seat.
So that's the same individual that in the prior video had been removed from the driver's seat.
Correct.
And did you see while you were moving the car how those two officers and that individual went from the Mercedes in the prior video to where they are now?
Correct.
How did that happen?
They brought him out, walked him over to the sidewalk, sat him down, one officer, then went over to the other people that was in the vehicle and started asking them questions.
And then the other officer had the driver sit on the ground there where we see him now.
Correct.
So then we'll continue to play Exhibit 36, please. So Exhibit 36 has ended and you stopped filming at that moment.
Yes, sir.
And why did you stop recording then?
Slightly still kind of scared, nervous that one of the officers kept staring at me like while I was recording. So I kind of put it down and then I went to record again, but I was like, I really don't want any problems. So I stopped recording.
At that point, did you think that this incident with this individual and the officers was over?
Somewhat I seen when I stopped recording, I drove towards the corner as they crossed over with George, the two officers that came and approached him in the first place. They went to walk him across the street. Then when we went to turn to go back home, we seen them placing him in the police car. So that's all I seen, and I kept on driving. I thought he was detained. I thought it was over, so I kept on going home.
Now, you referred to George.
Yes,
Who do you mean by that?
I felt that George was detained.
Okay. But when you use the name George, this individual who was removed from the SUV, the Mercedes, did you know that gentleman?
No, not at all.
Have you subsequent to this learned who that was?
Yes, sir.
Was that George Floyd?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you saw them moving Mr. Floyd after you stopped recording?
Right. Yes, sir.
So I'm going to put Exhibit 1 back up, please. And if you would, again, show the jurors, where you saw them. Well, if you would just put an X on here where you were parked when you made that second video. Do you know what I mean?
Ooh. I didn't take
Should we
that
try again? Okay. And then if you would, show the jurors where you saw them walking Mr. Floyd after you stopped recording.
and walking him this way.
And so then at some point you started up your car and drove off out of the area.
Correct.
And can you show the jurors where you drove when you did that? And so the record should reflect you turned from 38th Street to go what would be southbound on Chicago.
Correct.
And the record should also reflect that you're indicating the officers walking Mr. Floyd from the Dragon Walk corner, what would be northbound on Chicago, correct?
Correct.
Towards the Cup Food Store.
Correct.
Now, when you turned and went south on Chicago, had they already walked Mr. Floyd in front of you over to that, or did you cut in front of them? Do you know what I mean?
I believe they already crossed. I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. It was a while ago. I'm not sure if they was before or after, to tell you the truth.
But at one point you said earlier that you saw them putting him in a squad car.
Right.
Where did you
Correct.
see that taking place?
Over here.
So when you turned to go southbound, is that when you looked to see?
Behind us. Really, yeah.
And then have anything else to do with that scene that night?
Nope. That's it.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any cross? Okay. Sir, you may step down. Thank you. Sidebar? Members of the jury, it looks like the best schedule would be to take our lunch break now. We'll try and reconvene about 1:15. Thank you.